Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable discussion on what it's like to be an LGBTQ person in public safety. Today, this diverse group of individuals has generously decided to bring their unique experiences and perspectives to the table. As we navigate the nuances between identity and their call to serve, we want to acknowledge the courage required not only to clock in every day, but to exist authentically in spaces that haven't and still aren't always welcoming to members of the queer community. Our guests today are going to share their experiences and perspectives on what it's been like for them to hold space in the intersection between their personal and professional identities, with the goal of offering support, education, and to shine a light on the importance of creating and maintaining inclusive environments within our respective communities and workplaces. So I just want to first thank our guests for joining us today. You guys are amazing for being here, as well as thanking everyone who has decided to tune in and give us a watch. My name is Katie Bingner, she, her. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, communication coach, and the RfP, Responders for Pride, mental health ambassador. I'm a cis queer woman, and I will be our moderator for today's conversation. Joining me are Nicola McGuire, she, her, EMS lieutenant, president of Responders for Pride, cis lesbian. Jordan, she, her, police officer. Carlos Velez, paramedic. And Theo Queen, he, him, fire captain. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So, to just start us out, I'm going to ask you guys a question. It may be annoying, bear with me. But if you had to pick one word that would describe your experience as LGBTQ plus in public safety, what would it be?
Difficult.
What's that?
Yeah, difficult.
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 I would say for me, a little bit of the opposite actually. It's been surprisingly good. I don't know if that's, people in front of me were able to pave the way, so I have that luxury, but I've actually felt pretty accepted. Haven't seen a lot of challenges due to that, at least yet.
Okay, yeah. So already we have kind of like two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
How about you, Theo?
I would say terrifying, but good now.
So kind of both, a mix.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So would any of you guys like to kind of elaborate on the word you chose and what has really been your experience around that?
Reason why I said difficult is because it feels like when I came into my career early 2005, my experience coming out of the academy, going to my first duty station, I was met with a captain that brought me into his office and said straight out, there's no secret who you are. And just so you know, people may not be very open to you. And I just want you to know that. My mouth kind of dropped. I didn't know if he was trying to be supportive and helpful and kind of give me that heads up, or if he himself was part of that. So very early in my career, I felt like I was going to have a challenge. And I have had a challenge. I've pretty much fought to where I've gotten. Is a male-dominated, cis male, straight dominant profession, and where I have felt that queer women are more accepted because they have similar interests, I have not been.
So essentially, you're in the situation where this higher up is telling you this. It's a very that message is a very clear message of kind of othering, right? Us, them, you, us. And you didn't know, are you like the spokesperson for this perspective, or are you trying to be a bridge, or what? But
Right. And I
and
didn't know how to respond. I just said, okay, I, I, I understood what he meant, but I didn't necessarily understand like how he felt.
yeah. Did it feel clear what the goal was in having this conversation with you, or were you like, what's the point of it? Like, what are you trying to say?
No, I had no idea. When you go to a new assignment, generally your superiors will sit you down and give you their expectations. So, sitting down with him out of the academy and having a conversation didn't wasn't something that I didn't expect. Like I expected it, I just didn't expect the conversation to go in that direction.
What's everybody's thoughts about that? I mean, anybody have a similar experience or?
So I'm going to chime in. My experience is kind of in the middle. Me and Carlos have had this conversation where being a lesbian in the fire department is very different from being a gay male in the fire department or being a trans member in the fire department. Again, like he said, they feel like we have similar interests. So there is that open talk that continues with certain things they said. But I've also heard certain things that have been said to me that try to take away me being a lesbian and try to tell me that it's just, I haven't found the right guy yet. Like comments like that continue even to this day. But also I think with Carlos, like coming out of the academy, we're always taught you stop and you listen, you don't talk, right? You're a rookie and you just listen. And then to be told that you just listen and you are not accepted that's like heartbreaking. And mine has been mixed. I also fight the battle every day at work, being the liaison and having conversations with people and hear the things that they say and things like that. So I feel like like while I'm accepted, it's still scary, and I feel that fear for other people that are coming in. And yeah.
Anybody else?
So I had a similar experience as Nicola. So I'm transgender, female to male, and I came in the department as a lesbian, and I felt like I was pretty generally accepted. No one really had problems with my sexuality, other than like the comments like Nicola said, you just haven't found the right guy yet and stuff like that. Coming in or transitioning while in the fire department, I think I've been fortunate. I haven't really experienced. I think people are just afraid to approach the topic in general. So therefore, I haven't had any negative comments towards me, but I have heard, other people have had negative experiences, but that's terrible. Me as a fire captain, I cannot imagine setting that kind of example for a rookie coming in and not accepting somebody based on something so minuscule in the character and the work ethic of that person. And it's super disheartening that he's had that experience, because that's absolutely terrible, like absolutely terrible. And that conversation, I'm pretty sure, probably shaped Carlos's career for the rest of his life. Like, that's terrible. I'm sorry, dude.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's not something that you haven't already experienced. Like I've already experienced that, when I was in the military prior to being in the fire department, but it was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So you pretty much didn't really say anything and you kind of just went along, with your business. And I was in the reserve. So it's only, 1 week in a month that I actually had to go and hide myself of who I was. although some people did know. It was just something you didn't talk about. But now here I am in a 25 plus year career that I've dedicated myself to, and this is how I'm starting it. Now I start to think about how's the rest of what's the next 25 years going to be like. And you just don't know. So it's like you take one day at a time and you just navigate your way through your career and figure out, how to deal with things as it comes about. I felt like I was left on the back burner, constantly having to kind of figure out my way through the department myself because I didn't have that support. It seemed like people wanted to write me up any second any chance that they got, for whatever reason, and just create this file against me. And instead of, taking a new member by the hand and helping them navigate through their career, I was left to figure it out on my own.
So I want to ask, there's a couple of things that I'd like to lean into a little bit here. One is a point that you brought up, Carlos, which is that for a lot of members of the queer community, it's kind of a lifetime experience of navigating these types of situations in different contexts, right? And you had this experience with the military before, which almost kind of bakes in what Nicola was talking about, right? You listen, you don't speak, right? Like you're the subordinate or whatever. And so there's this element of kind of, here's another obstacle, hurdle, challenge, threat to my existence. But also I've been here, I've kind of done this before.
Yeah, exactly.
Something that I have come across in conversation and even doing some research is that a lot of first responders, queer first responders, and I use that term generally as kind of an umbrella term. But if anybody has issue with that, please let me know. But I have noticed that there's a lot of comment around when people are asked, like, is this a problem being LGBTQ plus in, public safety? People say, well, nobody cares. They don't care. Like my colleagues don't care. People don't care. There's a lot of that phrasing. And I was just curious what you guys think about, do you think there's a difference between your colleagues, your higher ups not caring versus, about your identity versus them being actively supportive, kind of creating bridges and connections to help you feel included and welcome and safe versus kind of like, oh, well, nobody cares. It's fine.
Yeah, I'll touch in on that because I think that comment, nobody cares, right? It's, I don't want to hear it. I don't care what you do, but I don't want to hear it, right? Instead of being like, oh, tell me about, for me, your wife, your kids, right? And embracing my family. They can talk about their family all day long, right? And their kids and things like that. But I know early in my career when I didn't come out right away in the department, it was scary to me to come out in the department. And you always got that, oh, we don't care what you do. We just don't want to hear about it. And it's not even like we want to talk about what's going on in the bedroom, because that's not even it, right? We want to talk about our families, the people we love, the people that make an impact on us. And I think that that's what that I don't care is, right? I think it's more of a, oh, we don't care. Like, it's fine. You be you, but don't be you and don't talk about your family or what's going on. I mean, we grow up with that so much, right? I think the queer community, the LGBT community, we don't get to be our authentic selves growing up, right? And then in this career, it's very similar to that too. That's my thought.
Yeah, thank you. I think you make a really great point. Anybody want to chime in on that?
Like the way my workplace is, like I said before, I think I do. I mean, obviously, you guys probably all have a lot more time on in your workplace probably than I do. Carlos, like you said, you did a whole military stint before you even did this, and you were serving in that time that Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I think I have the luxury of being in that aftermath. There is like that, like Nick was talking about, like the I don't care. I personally have never found it to be like a I don't want to hear about it type deal. However, I'm sure there are plenty of different types of people with different types of opinions. However, no one's made me feel uncomfortable. I will say what I do appreciate is that, like, I mean, there are LGBTQ members of my department, like all through the ranks, but like regardless of like sexual orientation. I mean, if I have like introduced my wife to higher ranking officers or brass, and like I see them again, they'll be like, oh, hey Jordan, and ask me like, how's my wife doing, which I think is nice. Like it's not necessarily like some like bridge perhaps, but I mean, I'm at least being treated the same as like, a heterosexual officer, where they would probably have that same conversation, like, oh, how's your wife? How's your husband? Which I appreciate personally. I think they do a good job of that.
I feel like what you're kind of highlighting there, Jordan, is like there's like signaling, right? We talk about like microaggressions, covert, overt ways
Right.
that we communicate tolerance or intolerance or acceptance or inclusivity or not. And that, so it's like it seems to be kind of like a signaling of, hey, there seems to be there seems to be like a welcoming energy that that feels I don't know, maybe safe for you in your department.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to put that word in your mouth, but like, is that
No,
what
no, 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 no. I would say so. Like I said, I'm not the first, definitely not the last. And there is like a good little group of officers that are in our community. Like I said, all through ranks, so I feel a little more comfortable. I imagine those officers probably, higher up and longer they've been there, probably went through a completely different experience, possibly even closer to what Carlos and Nicola went through, and Theodore. So like I said, I think I just have the luxury of coming in on the back end of like what people have worked hard to like achieve for our community as far as public safety. However, I am sorry to hear like what you guys had to go through, in your workplaces, because it doesn't sound like a good environment. You know what I mean? Especially deal with it twice, Carlos. I really feel for you.
No, thanks. I appreciate it.
So I'm wondering what your perspectives are, because I think this opened up a door to talking about like geographical location, generational changes, right? Like these all seem like relevant points to this conversation because it really does seem to highlight different experiences for the individual depending on when you were starting and how long you've been in the game, so to speak, and also where you're located. Now, we're not going to talk about specific locations today, but it could be anything from right like coastal compared to like middle America, right? Or even our country versus, internationally. What do you guys seem to notice in terms of the differences in experience based on those points?
I think a lot of per the way that we may be treated or perceived or accepted, a lot of it. So we're like a like a metropolitan. We got suburbia. We got a little bit of city action. We got a vast amount of rural in our community. And our members in the department reflect those demographics to a point. But starting out, a lot of our department's demographic was coming from like rural communities or smaller communities where they may have never interacted with someone in the queer community. And we're slowly working to change the face of our department, but in our general department, that it was the face. So I think the most issues that we have are people that just have been sheltered or have lacked experience with the queer community. But it's getting better, I would say.
I think a big part of it is generation. As we have, as older members in the department, older generations have started to retire, we start to see younger individuals coming in with a different mindset, a different perspective. They're more inclusive. So I find that I connect better with people younger than me than those my age or even older. And it's a weird position to be in. But like Theo said, you know, where we work, there is different backgrounds because we have metropolitan, you know, or like some urban areas that people are coming from, as well as the rural communities outside of even our state. You know, they commute in, and they have, you know, their thoughts and perspectives based on where they're coming from. So you never know how you can really navigate because you never know who you are interacting with. Not everybody is from the same area. Everybody doesn't have the same thought process. And it feels like you're constantly walking on eggshells, really. Like I feel uncomfortable going to the bathroom when another male is in there because I don't know what their perspective is going to be with me going into the bathroom, although I'm not using the same, you know, I'm not right next to them as I use the bathroom. You know, it's still that sense of discomfort
That heightened awareness.
of how I'm being viewed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make anybody else uncomfortable. So I'm uncomfortable for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting you say that, Carlos, because as a trans man in this department, I have like the same, I guess, bathroom anxiety. And that's like, I can definitely relate to you feeling that way because I know that I definitely try to use like gender neutral bathrooms as much as I can, or I will wait until I know nobody's in the bathroom and then I'll go and use the restroom. Um, just because, I mean, I feel uncomfortable, but I also don't want the other person to feel uncomfortable for any reason. So I find like the best way is just to avoid it altogether.
Yeah,
So,
you don't want to bring attention to yourself,
correct.
and that's how I feel. I walk into the bathroom, I'm going to bring attention to myself. I'm going to make them uncomfortable, which makes me uncomfortable, knowing that I will walk. If I see somebody go in before I do, I will walk slowly, you know, or just wait a minute before I walk, so they're walking out as I walk in. I definitely would prefer gender neutral bathrooms. Um, where it's single stall that I can go in and do my thing and come out, and I don't have to worry about anybody else coming in or me walking in on anyone else.
Were you going to add something, Nicola?
Yeah. So working on it. But I think that's something that we do all the time. We don't want to make other people uncomfortable
Yeah.
all the time. I think that is something that the gay community, the queer community, whatever you want to identify with, you don't want to make somebody uncomfortable, even though it makes you hide yourself a little bit more, right? You may not talk the way you normally talk, right? I've had multiple men now since I've been liaison actually come out to me at work, and they won't come out to everybody because they feel that hiding themselves and not making anybody else uncomfortable with who they are helps that view on what they are as a fireman, right? So they feel that today I'm a great fireman. But the moment that somebody finds out that I'm gay and I make them uncomfortable with who I am, I'm going to be viewed as a completely different fire person, right? Fireman. And I've had that come up a lot in the past 2 to 3 weeks, which is really interesting to me. The bathroom issue, I think, is a bathroom issue throughout the country, right? It's something that with other liaisons and other departments that I've talked to and had their thing, that's a thing, right? We need gender neutral bathrooms throughout because of that uncomfortableness. And not just in the trans community, as Carlos says, in the gay, like him walking into a bathroom. For females, we have separate stalls, right? It's easy for us. Yep. So we've got a door, right? Nobody knows what's going on behind that door. So I feel that that's something. Speaking with other jurisdictions and other places throughout the country, those rural areas really struggle if they're LGBT in their departments. So I think that getting back to that geographical part is very,
There's so many variables that are involved in shaping our experiences, and variables that start before you even know what you want to do or enter into your profession, right? And then they come with you into the complex nature of then all the other stuff. But it's interesting, this topic of this idea of the real concern about making others uncomfortable, right? It seems to be just kind of a part of some of the wiring you guys are experiencing. Just like internally, it seems like they've got like a very automatic response that there needs to be like some hypervigilance around making sure that I'm not making other people feel uncomfortable, or I'm making sure that I'm facilitating their comfort. And I was wondering if that relates at all to something that, Nicola, you had said earlier. You'd made a comment about how, coming out earlier in your career, you were afraid. And I'm wondering if you guys think there's like a correlation with this drive to prioritize other, your team's, your colleagues' comfort, and a sense of safety in that approach.
I would probably say yes to that. I feel like if I keep it internal, I'm safer, right? If I'm not making them uncomfortable, they're not looking at me. I'll fly under the radar and I'll just be,
Or like, I'll be one of the good ones, one of the comfortable ones to be around, maybe.
correct. Yeah, I'm not anymore, right? But yeah.
Right. You want to, by kind of like suppressing who you are, you can change maybe their perspective of the LGBT community by being someone not as open. I'm not that
in
bad.
quotation.
Right. I'm not, people like me aren't that bad,
We're normal.
We're normal.
Right.
We're just like you. So we suppress who we are.
Theo, were you going to chime in?
I think saying the word safety, I've never feared for like my physical safety in the department, but I think that we do this for our own mental safety and to kind of keep that guard up so that, it's one less thing we have to deal with, one less stressor in our already stressful career. Which is crazy to me because the people that we encounter that aren't accepting or make comments or are, I guess, bullying in a way, they don't care. Like, I just struggle sometimes wondering why I'm walking on eggshells or why I censor myself when the person that is doing the harm to me isn't doing that as well. So like, why do we need to be quiet and censor ourselves?
Right.
But it's just the way that the world is and the way that we've all been taught. And we just continue on this pattern until recently, we've started to speak up for ourselves, but.
Right. And I would agree. I don't feel unsafe as far as my safety is concerned. But yeah, my mental health might, I want to protect that. I need to feel safe and secure in my mental well-being. You
bring up excellent points because, when we hear the word safety, particularly maybe if you're in public safety, the automatic assumption is we're talking about physical safety. And there's this much broader, bigger element of mental and emotional safety, right, of existing and inclusivity and the nuances around being vulnerable, not necessarily physically, but again, mentally, emotionally, relationally. These are, as I understand it, and my wife is in law enforcement, you guys are all in public safety, right? As I understand it, public safety provides its own little microcosm of, right, community, right? It's like the getting it of it all, doing what you do every day. It's a very unique perspective and experience in life. And that is already hard enough for other people to understand who don't do what you do. And so the importance of like camaraderie and being a part of the team and the unit and knowing you're going to keep each other safe and you're going to have each other's backs. I'm wondering how you feel like that plays a role in all of this conversation around like, what is it like for you, or what has it been like for you to know, okay, so like when we go on calls or when we participate in whatever it is that you're doing for your work, I need to know that we're all going to keep each other physically safe. But then there's the relational, social element and how that plays in.
I think going into a burning building, in my experience, even the fire department has done a very good job of, we may not get along at the station, or you might not agree with my lifestyle, or I might not agree with yours, but when everything hits the fan and like I've been in a fire, there's no one thinking about any of that. And if one of us was to go down, like there would be no hesitation to come help. So I think that is definitely, it kind of goes out the window, which is one thing that gives me hope for the future. Because in a high stress situation, if we don't care, then when we're sitting around the kitchen table, it's hopefully gets better. And it has gotten better in my career, but yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. The other day I was getting I should have probably called a signal 13, which is where I'm in trouble and people should come help me. But just my voice on the radio allowed people to know that I was not in a good spot. And then all of a sudden people were just coming, right? They weren't even dispatched on the call. They're like, where are you? We're coming, right? So I feel that like, yeah, that part for me, like it goes out the window when we need you, they're there, right? So.
I can agree with that. I feel like acceptance on my end came less from the sexuality aspect and more so like job performance. So like when my squad finally accepted me, it was because, oh, I proved myself as like a reliable, sector partner. But the camaraderie was important. And like you said, like whenever I need help, people can tell by my voice on the radio and they come to help me. You know what I mean? Or not letting me go places alone even when I wanted to. Something silly like an alarm. I was like, I got this. My partners show up anyway because they care. But it's like, I don't know if it's like for you guys, it is like one big trauma bond sometimes, right? You go through a lot and then all of a sudden you become a little closer like a family. Like my squad, they all came to my wedding. I think the one guy who couldn't, it was because he was deployed, but that meant a lot to me. But it just shows like what we built. But I will say it was probably more based on like job performance. Like I never felt like someone wouldn't show up because of my sexuality or anything like that.
Can I hit on a point that Jordan just said?
Please.
Right? Like it's that job performance, right? So I feel like, and this is going to come into the women part of it.
No,
right?
for sure.
So being a woman, right, in public safety, and like being a gay male, you feel like you have to prove yourself that little bit more, right? That I'm not weak, right? Because we're viewed as weaker.
Sure.
So that I'm not weak, I can do this job. I can the same way. I feel like that's something that we do too, right? So.
No, that's very true. Like females in public safety do sometimes as a whole get the bad rep, maybe because, there's a few that maybe make a mistake or don't, act to the full their ability. And then we all get that blanket. And I don't know if it was like this for you, Nicola, but like you have that one incident where like you really prove yourself and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you're good. You know what I mean? Like you're good. But it is something that's like almost
you're good. Come on over.
Yeah. It's like, but it is almost earned like that moment. And there's a lot of pressure because you feel like you can't make the same mistakes as a woman. And then you add, the queer aspect to it as well. And it's like two things you're kind of compensating for sure.
Definitely is.
Yeah.
So, oh gosh, like there's so many little nuances of this conversation that I'm like, but I wanted to ask, like, so we're talking about, there seems to be, from what I'm hearing you guys say, there seems to be kind of like these two parallel existences of like when you're on the job and that switch that everybody switches over to do the job and you're a unit. right? It's like you are one almost. And then when the crisis ends and you're back to kind of the sticky kind of like where, who we are and our differences and the social relational element of it. I'm kind of wondering, like, what do you see, or what has been the impact for you in terms of mental, emotional health and well-being, having to kind of bounce back and forth from, I know, like Theo, you had said it gives you a little bit of hope to see when we all come together and we are going to have each other's backs, that can start to kind of bleed into the social relational spaces that we all take up, where it's kind of like, oh, okay, it doesn't make this person, fill in the negative connotation. Like, this is a person who has my back. We are all together in this, and kind of helping people want to be more just supportive and inclusive. But what has been your experience about, like, navigating that parallel between, well, in these moments we're united, I get the support, and then when we shift over to existing here in these spaces, it's different.
I think when you're with the same people, the same shift all the time. I like the word that Jordan used, or two words, trauma bond. So we have this peak kind of where we're in the station, and then we go to this high stress trauma situation where we all work together. And then after that, we kind of like plateau, or it's a downward slope back into that transition, back into the station life, I guess you could say. I found in my experience that it all kind of starts to even out the more calls that we go on together and the more we work together in those high stress situations. Instead of that, I guess, like sharp, steep downfall after that trauma bond's been established, it starts to level off. And what disrupts that is when you're detailed to other stations, or you transfer somewhere and then you're working to build that back up and then get that plateau effect that you want, which could be, mentally exhausting. Like, kind of thinking, I just, went into a burning building with you, and then now we're back to square one, where I'm trying to explain myself, or trying to teach you what it is to be transgender or whatever, and prove to you that I am just like everybody else. So yeah, I think it definitely gets better if you're with the same group, but again, we're with so many different people all the time, so we kind of lose that sometimes.
That makes so much sense. Any thoughts about that, guys?
No, it sounds mentally exhausting. I would say, just not even in, I would imagine, like the public safety space, but just in society as a whole, queer men have a harder time being accepted. I mean, obviously I'm not going to speak to Nicola's experience, but typically, like, we're a little more accepted just in general, not even doing a male dominated field, but just in terms of like lesbians are more sexualized or what have you. So it's easier for people to conceptualize. But like, yeah, like outside of like the trauma bond, even so, like, it's weird. Like, I know every public safety probably touts that we're a family thing and we all roll our eyes. My squad very much, I'm sure, and I think I was blessed just to have good squads as I've been here, because it does depend who you work with. But like, we were always cool across the, like, call, and after the call, like, we're all at Dunkin' together. We're all hanging on the same spot doing paperwork together. So there was no weird like valley or awkward spot. But again, that like came, like, that camaraderie did come from my job performance, of course. I would say like there are like a lot of layers to it. Like, there is the female aspect for me, like the African American aspect. It can change things up. But I will say, like, it's like that family thing where it's like how we treat our siblings. Like, yeah, I'll mess with you, but no one else can type deal. Sometimes it feels like, and as a whole, I feel like it's departments. I don't know. I mean, I'm not on the fire side, so I don't know. It's like, I'm sure cultures are completely different, even though we do similar things.
Thoughts, you guys?
For me, like the mental health, the draining part of it is like being a liaison. I'm on education all day long. right? Like I get asked all the questions about all of the things. I don't know all the answers. I have to reach out to people sometimes and be like, hey, somebody asked me this question. How do I answer it? Right. And I feel like that currently is my role, right? This is currently the role that I took on and currently wanting to change the culture, right? Like that whole culture that we have of we're still in a white dominated male field, right? And like educating and getting that generational gap out it's exhausting some days. Some days it's very exhausting. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, looking in, part of what I think about is, are you a liaison just to put somebody there? Does the departments really put a liaison in place because they care and they want to help with change and progression? I feel like they don't want to deal with certain things, so they say, here's a person, here's a title, go to them. So we don't have to deal with it. We don't want to hear about it. We have other things to deal with. And I feel like you get the title, you get the position, you feel like you can um, help with some change and progression within the departments that have LGBTQ plus liaisons. But are they coming back to you and asking, what has the field told you? What is it that we can do better? Or do they kind of just leave you out there on your own and don't give you any assistance or support?
Well, I can absolutely answer that, right? Sometimes it feels like you're just a face, right? And that support isn't there. Since that has been part of it, right? Just, hey, we have an LGBTQ liaison, go to her. Again, one of the people that came out to me at work was like, look, we have these unions, we have these different groups, we have that. The LGBT community has you. That's all we've got is you to come to in this department. And I mean, I've had conversations about the bathrooms and I was told that it wasn't an issue, right? And I was like, it absolutely is an issue. And somebody else had to have a conversation about the bathrooms being an issue. So there is that part of just being the face. I will say with me just being the face, and that's how it does feel because I don't get the support. The last time somebody talked to me from the administration, no matter the emails, has been a long time, no matter the emails that I've sent. I put myself in the recruit classes, right? So I go in and I teach LGBTQ history, awareness, and how to talk to the LGBT community, right? I started that and I was like, until you tell me to stop, I'm going to go in and I'm going to teach this. You know what it gets you? Your cultural competencies for your department that you need to have, right? I know that we put trainings up on our LMS. I said that they needed to be mandatory. They have not been made mandatory. And I continuously say that. Yeah, jump in.
I'm sorry, because I'm noticing that what you're saying, Nicola, seems to kind of connect back to this kind of burden, this sense of responsibility that like the queer individual holds or the community within the community holds to, again, like take the initiative and make the space more educated, welcoming, inclusive, which is quite a burden. I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that, like, we're coming back around to, the same energy that it takes to walk into a bathroom, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It does take a lot. It needs a group, right? I know that I have my support within the department that I can go to and be like, hey, I need help with this. And these people are going to rally, right? They're going to come around me. They're going to help me. I definitely have that support within my community, Let's go with that. Like, we've got the fire department community, and then I've got my, LGBTQ community in there too. They're going to totally rally around me and help me when I need that help. But it has been, yeah, I've been working on trying to get every fire department a safe space for over a year now. And for me, I feel like every county building within every county, every jurisdiction should be a safe space for all people, right? Every government building for all people should be a safe space because as a government building, you're there for all the people. So that's something that I've also been working on, but it's been a challenge. It feels like it's a fight every day for simple things. Okay?
You're swimming up
Yeah.
a very rapid river.
And I'm not a salmon, and it's really hard to jump.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about this? I have another question that I wanted to ask, and it kind of pertains to some stuff that's been brought up already, but I wanted to just check in and see any other thoughts about this.
As far as burden goes, I definitely feel that. So my department, there's 3 openly transgender people. Before me, there was never a transgender officer, and it's only been within the last probably, I came out 6 years ago, I think. So within the last 10 years, we'll say that the department started to have openly transgender people known in it. There was a trans woman previously, years and years ago, who she was basically run out and found another job because of the amount of hardship that she faced. But it's definitely a huge burden. Like, I've had a fairly good experience with people accepting me for being transgender, but I do know the other transgender members that have not had those positive experiences. So I feel like, one, being a fire captain in a position of authority, and 2, being not as a more outspoken person, that I have like this burden to make change within the department on behalf of them, and not for myself, but to make it better for them or for anybody else that comes along. So I definitely relate to Nicola. Nicola and I've had a lot of conversations over frustrations, but yeah, it's definitely a huge burden.
Well, I'm just, I'm sitting here listening and thinking the intersectionality of all the identity, it's just like, I'm a visual person, and it just like it adds up and it adds up. It's like on just like this base level, the work that you do is so burdensome, mentally, emotionally, physically. And then on top of that, navigating your existence within that, again, more and more and more. And then really, I think it sounds like coming to terms with how am I going to participate in this community? How out am I going to be? How much trust am I going to afford, and vulnerability am I going to embrace? And what's the cost, the cost benefit analysis of that, right? It's like, do I trust people, let more people in, try to have more stronger bonds, stronger sense of community? And what do I stand to lose if I do that and something happens and then I've got more trauma?
Yeah.
You're like, pretty much. Fair enough. So the question that I wanted to ask is that, so we talked about like this idea of bonding and culture. And I know that like, let's see, banter, teasing, however you phrase it, jonesing is like what phrase my wife uses. I know that this is like a kind of a key element that builds bonds in the first responder community, right? Like there's like and military and paramilitary communities, right? It's like it kind of builds camaraderie when you're like messing with each other, joking with each other, right? And I'm wondering, what your experience has been like, and also like, do you have perspective on, well, okay, as a marginalized individual who is coming into this community and expected to find the humor in all of that, but then also what about when it crosses a line, and what is it like to be like in that moment making a decision? Do I laugh along with it, even though this is really incredibly offensive and kind of threatening, or do I say something and put myself out there? Like, how have you navigated what I'm sure you've all experienced to some degree, if I understand correctly, like this is part of the culture. So how have you guys navigated that?
I'll say like I think my department is it takes it very seriously when you cross the line, of course. So like yeah, we joke around and stuff, and especially like I said, like your squad is more like your family, so you're a little more comfortable with them. You kind of know who you're cool with or who you can. I don't want to say like you cross a boundary, but obviously like certain jokes are acceptable with a close friend versus an acquaintance, right? I think in times where it has crossed the line, I have seen like it be addressed as far as through the department when it has gotten to that level. So I don't, to my knowledge, like nothing's ever been swept under a rug. As long as someone's willing to come forward and there has been like backlash from that person coming forward, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, like we joke around stuff, and I mean, I personally find like when we crack jokes, like the joke's funny. Like I've never had someone, offend me, or say anything offensive, or felt like they said something and then come back and be like, "Hey, I don't know if I offended you, and I'm sorry," but like no one's ever had that like awkward conversation with me either. Definitely respecting, and I think it comes from a departmental culture, what your department pushes out there. I think ours is pretty good about like not crossing certain lines, or like the appropriateness of your inter-office banter, so to speak.
Well, right. And it's so individualized, right? So it's like what
is.
one person finds like, okay, fine, cool, whatever, we're good. Not offending me, but could be a totally different experience for someone else. I'm wondering, Theo, Carlos, what do you guys think?
So I'm usually not a very I'm not somebody that gets easily offended unless you actually direct something to me in order to offend me. If I know that you're purposely coming after me, then I will be, offended, and I will argue back. But generally speaking, conversations don't tend to bother me that much. But, I have had instances, not in my current department, where others have utilized that as a way to kind of try to force me out the door. I've had people make accusations that I have said stuff falsely, accuse me of saying things in order to get rid of me.
Interesting.
So, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because now it's you, he said, she said. How do you prove that you didn't say what you said or did what you did? You're automatically guilty, especially when you are from a minority group like LGBTQ, being Puerto Rican, being African American. So you're guilty before proven innocence.
I hadn't thought about it from the other way around, but yeah, you make such a valid point. What about you, Nicola?
Yeah, I mean, I think early in my career, I would just kind of let it go, right? If it was offensive, I'd just kind of be like, yeah, I wouldn't laugh. I just wouldn't say anything. Now, I mean, yeah, we do the joking, we have fun. I think that teasing is when that joking, that banter, that teasing kind of goes in place. That's when you know you've made it, right? That's when you're like, oh yeah, I'm in, right? But I will say that now, if somebody says something that like crosses that line, I'm like, hey, let's talk about that, right? And why that's not good, because I think that goes a lot further, right? I think then everybody in the room hears why it's not okay to do that, instead of just. I'm very much on that. Like, I absolutely agree with the ability to be able to go and make a complaint and do those things. There are certain things that have to go to that level, right? But I think there are some things that we always talk. In the fire department, we solve the world's problems around the kitchen table, right? I think that's one of those things that can be solved around the kitchen table. Like, we're going to sit and we're going to talk about it. Now, if you would come to me like 12 years ago, 13 years ago in my career, I would be like, right, and keep it quiet. And now I'm just like, I mean, I'm an officer, so I get to be able to stand up and say that too. And I think it gives a level of respect within that part too, right? Yeah. So
I would agree with Nicola. Nicola and I are very outspoken people. So I think if something does go too far, if I'm able to address it on the spot, I will. If not, I'll pull somebody aside. As far as from like the transgender side of things, I found that a lot of things, education goes a long way. And I mean, people have been dealing with gay and queer and lesbian by whatever for years and years and years, but transgender is like this new kind of thing to a lot of people. So I found that, like, if I am offended by a comment as an officer, if I feel like it needs to be addressed formally, then absolutely. But that I haven't had that kind of issue yet. Hopefully I never do. But a lot of it is just education, like, hey, this is why this offends me, and just teaching people. Education definitely goes a long way.
You make an excellent point. You know, it's historically, right, when we look at progress through history, there was still it was still a very kind of binary perspective of like gay, lesbian. And then now we're having these broader conversations around gender identity. And that's like a whole nother level of conversation that is difficult for people to kind of wrap their head around, right? Is like just getting out of the this or the that. And so there is so much education that is like really necessary. And also I think, right, like lived experience, having experiences with people of all gender identities and seeing that we're all humans still and also exist in this way. But it's just, I think it's really interesting, your different perspectives and experiences around how it's like this banter, this jonesing, this kind of bonding experience that is both essential for being like building that camaraderie and being a part of the unit, so to speak. And then also it can be like very quickly like weaponized.
Yeah.
In a variety of ways. And again, thank you, Carlos, for like bringing that other side of that coin, because I hadn't even thought about that around, you know, not just using covert tools and communications to say you're not welcome here, like put up with this kind of treatment or get out, but also really being able to completely weaponize it and say, hey, this person's making me feel uncomfortable. This person needs to go. This person is a problem, when it's already a culture that is kind of, that has just so many barriers for you to be able to connect and be a part of the unit and the one. So, okay, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we could talk about this forever. And I hope that we get to keep having these conversations. I know Nicola and I plan to continue having facilitating these types of conversations. But to kind of bring us around the corner, so to speak, I wanted to get an idea of what each of you, in terms of maybe like action steps that could be taken in departments to really help support a more inclusive, welcoming, safe, again, not necessarily just physically, but wholly safe environment for the LGBTQ plus community. You know, what do you think would be a really important action step, or what do you feel like would have changed your experience in making your experience safer, more inclusive, more welcoming?
I think as far as transgender, like I said, education. A lot of departments have diversity officers or like somebody that's in charge of all the groups, like that one head person that ensures that SOPs are written to protect people and all that stuff. However, those people I have found are generally more focused on racial topics and like male-female equality topics, and not necessarily focused on the LGBTQ community. So I feel like our departments could do a better job of trying to encompass all of the groups instead of just having a person that, and this is nothing against that one person, but their expertise may be on racial issues. And that's where people like Nicola come in, and they can act as like a cabinet for that person, but that person has to be able to understand how important it all is. So I think that like having the support from a diversity inclusion officer or somebody in that kind of role, and then having them trust us to say this is what we as a community need, and then help make that happen. And getting that education out there, especially for transgender. Like, I am so tired of people using my old pronouns, and I don't understand it. Like, you misgender a baby or a dog and you're able to change that pronoun within a split second, but I'm still being misgendered to this day. I don't look like a woman at all. So like, I don't get it. But, and everyone pretty much knows that I'm transgender in this department because I transitioned while I was in the department. But so it's just like simple education. If we could just push out some education about Nicola's doing a great job talking to recruits and everything about our community and things that are appropriate, not appropriate, but we definitely lack education. So that's my change.
Okay, so I'm hearing like education, but also you need like the systemic support
Yes.
to have the right amount of education, the right people educating, right? And it not just be burdened on one person to have to educate an entire department, city, whatever.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
I feel as those of us that are LGBTQ start to go up in rank, as Nicola is a lieutenant, Theo is a captain, we're able to have more of a voice and have that discussion and create those educational moments. Because me as a paramedic, I can try, but people aren't really paying attention to me. I'm just a workforce, you know. Is you need to have the ability to, you know, go up in rank and utilize your rank in order for change. And I think that these two do a fine job at doing that.
So moving up, seeing opportunities for promotion and really being able to, the word that comes to my mind is infiltrate, but I don't I don't know if I love that word, but I think you get what I mean, right? It's like we were talking about the generational divide, right? And there's this correlation, right? The higher up in rank you go, the older in age, right? The individuals tend to be. And so as you know, more diverse people are able to move up in the ranks, then we see that trickle down. Is that what you're saying, Carlos?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Which I think that's why like things are slowly getting better for all minority groups, and because our upper people are starting to look like us, and it's not the old generation of public servants that, you know, cisgender white male dominated field. Like, it's starting to reflect the actual people in the world. So there's definitely progress.
Nicola, Jordan.
I think like the cheat code there is like really, I think we kind of touched on it, but like it is investing in your officers and their wellness and their concerns. Like we don't have what Nicola does as far as like an officer, you know, that serves the other LGBTQ officers in the department. However, like we do have a liaison, like you're aware of him, but he's more so it's like us outreaching to the community. But I do say, like I will say, if we were to form that as a group, like I don't think we would get any pushback. Like I think it would be encouraged if it was something we felt the need to have. Like I don't see the department going against it. Like they would probably be fairly supportive. It's just I think as a group within my department, we haven't felt the need. Like we do have a minority union, we have a women's union. I think if we were to form one, I don't think it would be frowned upon. I just don't think we have had incidents that would cause us to feel the need to form that, if that makes sense. Like we haven't got together as a group with, you know, that intention yet. But if it were to happen, I don't see it being an issue. But that's the investment that's like making us feel comfortable saying like, hey, we want to get together as a group, or that's like them investing in our wellness or being good about SOPs that promote diversity or like, you know, dissuade hate speech or you know, mistreatment of others. So I think like a culture is important there.
You know, I just want to jump in real quick because as you were talking, Jordan, it kind of occurred to me, So like Theo and Carlos, and you guys were talking about kind of like that. I guess it sounds like almost like a more micro approach in terms of, moving up in rank and position in your unit, in your department, and making change that way. And then we've got Jordan, who your experience, Jordan, has been like holistically a really good one, and you feel really trusted and supported by your department. And I'm thinking like the more macro perspective of then, okay, so could departments who are really doing a great job then come and like connect with
Share that
other
information.
departments to then keep building on this trajectory?
Which is why I believe in a actual broader scope peer support system. We have a peer support system, but our peers might not be the ones we want to go to.
Right.
So it needs to be a bigger scale peer support where we are able to go to another jurisdiction and sit in with people that don't know us and we don't know them, and we can open up better and speak to those individuals, because we have drop-ins for our peer support that I'm like, I'm not going to that. I'm not discussing whatever I want to discuss in front of those people.
So
We need other options. If we were going to support our people, if we were going to support our people, our administration has to look at ways to really offer a wide range or a broader scope support, and not just have certain few individuals within the department you can go to.
So Carlos, are you saying like you'd like to see more like regional, national resources?
Right. And that would be networking with other departments within the area.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
So that's where Responders for Pride comes in, right? So we have a liaison list with the different departments, and one of our goals is to get those people together, right, and start having those conversations of what is your department doing that's great, like that I can bring to my department, and things like that, and just getting that whole conversation going of that, like as Jordan said, that holistic approach to just having a wellness within your department for all of its people. Right. And one of those things, like you said, you don't actually have an LGBT liaison for your people, right? I think the good thing about having one for your members and things like that is that you can have those conversations about peer support, because our peer support is very different than what we need. You have like the union membership that you can reach out for financial services. Financial services for the LGBT community is very different than it is because of the different laws that are in place for us, right? So I think that that's when help with gender affirming care, right? Like which department has that?
Right. Yeah.
There's no departments that have that, but we should have somebody that we can go to where we have gender affirming care. How do we get that? What does our healthcare look like? Things like that. And I think that that's where the liaison comes in. I think having these people within these departments just broadens that conversation. And I think it was hit on the nail. You need the trust and support of the administration to do that.
Thank you for bringing that up, Nicola. And I want to note that we're going to link all those fantastic resources that Responders for Pride has available to the show notes. I love saying that. And so, it can be easily accessed, and our hope is to, I think, build on that and keep growing. And again, like we were talking about, the goal with having this conversation and more conversations and brainstorming and sharing ideas and perspectives is really an investment in what we're talking about right now is how can we continue that upward trajectory of improving the lives and the environments and the experiences of our queer first responders and anybody, again, and as members of marginalized communities enter into these professions that are not historically welcoming, accepting, inclusive, to be able to make those spaces more and more representative and again, safe. I know, like that's that word. But I as a therapist, I use this word a lot as that holistic sense of being able to exist authentically, and not necessarily live without adversity or challenge, no, but be able to move through our world and our lives as we are, knowing that we belong here, we're valid, and we have a right to exist here, and that we can have this space, we can take up this space. So I wanted to ask if there was any kind of final thoughts. We're going to start wrapping up here for our conversation today. But any other final thoughts, ideas that you guys want to add?
I'll say something. I think that our departments have recognized that this is definitely that our community definitely needs support. I think the biggest thing is that our departments don't know how to approach that and properly implement that. We have SOPs that protect us from scrutiny or discrimination and everything, but from an administration standpoint, it checks that box. Yeah, we protect our members, but do we actually support our members is what our departments should be saying, and instead of just trying to check that box. And I think that it will, hopefully there's more of us that speak up and tell the departments our needs and plans of actions. I think it's our responsibility, or those willing to take on the responsibility, to speak up and not just say what your needs are, but try to give them ways to implement it or to affect change. So
perfect note to end this on. Thank you guys so much for being here, for having this conversation. We welcome any of you who want to kind of come back and continue the conversation. Please let us know if you want to, and we will leave a spot open for you for sure. For anybody who is interested in, tapping into some of the ideas and resources that we talked about today, we'll have the resources available, and you can go to respondersforpride.org. I was like, I want to make sure I get that right. .org for all access to everything that Responders for Pride has to offer. Thanks again, guys. Take good care of yourselves and each other. It's so important.
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.